The crack of Benjamin Taylor's fist against her cheekbone still echoed in Bethany Taylor's mind as she stumbled through the darkness, the cold Montana night air biting at her skin. Blood trickled from her split lip, mingling with the tears streaming down her face, her right eye already swelling shut. The year was 1876, and Bethany had finally done what she'd been threatening to do for years. She'd run from her father's ranch, leaving behind the only home she'd ever known, and the man who had turned from grieving widower to vicious tyrant in the 3 years since her mother's death. Bethany clutched her small bundle of possessions tighter as she stumbled over the uneven ground, her boots catching on rocks and scrub brush. She had no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between herself and the Taylor homestead before dawn. The nearest town, Silver Creek, was 15 miles to the west, but she dared not take the road. Her father would be looking for her come morning, and the first place he'd search would be the main thoroughfare. The night grew colder as clouds obscured the moon, leaving her in near total darkness. Bethany's limbs were growing numb, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as she pushed on. At 20 years old, she'd spent her entire life on her father's ranch, but now she was alone in the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back, $10 sewn into the hem of her dress, and whatever future she could carve out for herself. A wolf howled in the distance, and Bethany's heart seized with terror. She quickened her pace, ignoring the sharp pain in her side and the throbbing in her face. The terrain grew steeper, and she realized she was heading into the foothills rather than toward town. Lost and disoriented, she pressed on until her foot caught on a hidden root, sending her tumbling down a small embankment. Her head struck something hard, and for a moment, stars exploded behind her eyes. As she lay there, dazed and hurting, the sound of hoofbeats penetrated her consciousness. Terror gripped her anew. Had her father found her already? She scrambled to her feet, ready to run, when a deep voice called out through the darkness, "Hello there. Are you all right, miss?" The voice didn't belong to her father. Squinting through her good eye, Bethany could make out the silhouette of a man on horseback, his form backlit by what appeared to be a lantern. I'm fine," she called back, her voice cracking with fear. "Just passing through." The horseman dismounted, and Bethany took an instinctive step backward, nearly falling again. "Easy now," the man said, his voice gentle as he raised the lantern. In its warm glow, Bethany could see a young man, perhaps a few years older than herself, with a weathered face and kind eyes beneath the brim of his hat. "I'm not going to hurt you." As the light fell on Bethany's face, the man's expression changed from curiosity to concern. "My God, your face. Who did this to you?" Bethany turned away, shame and fear warring within her. "It's nothing. I need to keep moving." "In the dark? With a face that looks like that?" The man shook his head. "My ranch is just over that ridge. Name's Thomas Irwin. Most folks call me Tucker. I've got a spare room and some supplies to tend to that eye." "I can't," Bethany whispered. "He'll come looking for me." Understanding dawned on Tucker's face. "Your husband did this?" "My father," Bethany corrected, tasting blood as she spoke. Tucker's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "What's your name?" Bethany Taylor." "Well, Miss Taylor, whoever you're running from won't find you at my place. It's off the main roads, and I don't get many visitors." He extended his hand. "Stay here and rest, at least until morning. You can decide what to do next after you've had some sleep and that eye's been tended to." Bethany hesitated, years of her father's warnings about strangers ringing in her ears. But the sincerity in Tucker's eyes and the promise of safety, even temporary, was too compelling to resist. With trembling fingers, she took his hand. "Just for tonight," she agreed. Tucker nodded, helping her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "Hold on," he instructed, one arm encircling her waist to keep her steady. As they rode through the darkness toward his ranch, Bethany felt a curious mix of fear and relief. She had no way of knowing whether she'd just made the wisest or the most foolish decision of her life. Tucker's ranch was modest compared to her father's sprawling property, but in the pre-dawn light, it looked well-kept and peaceful. A small main house, a barn, and a few outbuildings comprised the homestead, with corrals holding a small herd of horses. As Tucker helped her dismount, Bethany winced at the pain radiating from her bruised ribs. "Easy now," Tucker said, supporting her weight as he led her to the house. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Daniels, will be here at sunrise. She's a good woman, discreet too." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and clean floors. Tucker lit several lamps, illuminating a cozy sitting room with a stone fireplace. "Let me get you some water and something for that eye," he said, disappearing into another room before returning with a basin of water, a cloth, and a small jar. "It's witch hazel and arnica. Mrs. Daniels makes it." Bethany sat rigidly on the edge of a chair as Tucker knelt before her, gently cleaning the blood from her face. His touch was tender, nothing like her father's rough handling, and despite herself, Bethany felt tears welling up again. "I'm sorry," Tucker said immediately, drawing back. "Am I hurting you?" Bethany shook her head. "No, it's been a long night." Tucker nodded, resuming his ministrations with even greater care. "Your father," he said after a moment, "is he likely to come looking for you?" "Yes," Bethany whispered. "Benjamin Taylor doesn't take kindly to disobedience." Tucker's eyes widened slightly. "Benjamin Taylor of the Double T?" Bethany nodded miserably. "I know of him," Tucker said, his voice carefully neutral. "He got a reputation around these parts." "He wasn't always like this," Bethany found herself saying. "After my mother died, something in him just broke. The drinking got worse, and then the anger. He used to just yell, but lately—" She touched her swollen eye gingerly. Tucker's expression darkened. "No man has the right to raise a hand to his daughter, no matter what the circumstances." He finished tending to her injuries and stood. "You should get some rest. The bedroom at the end of the hall is made up. I'll be in the barn seeing to the horses if you need anything." Bethany hesitated. "Mr. Irwin." "Tucker's, please." "Tucker, thank you. I don't know how I'll repay your kindness, but I will." A small smile softened his features. "There's nothing to repay. Get some sleep, Miss Taylor." "Bethany," she corrected, offering him a tentative smile in return, despite the pain it caused her split lip. As Tucker left, Bethany made her way to the bedroom he'd indicated. It was simple but clean, with a comfortable-looking bed and a window overlooking the eastern horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to appear. She placed her small bundle on a chair and sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. For the first time since fleeing her father's ranch, Bethany allowed herself to consider her situation. She had no plan, no destination, and precious little money. The skills she possessed, cooking, sewing, tending a garden, might earn her a position as a housekeeper or cook, but such jobs were scarce in these parts, and even if she found work, her father's influence extended throughout the county. If he wanted to find her, he would. With these troubling thoughts swirling in her mind, Bethany lay down, not bothering to remove her dirty dress or boots. Despite her anxiety, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Bethany awoke, the room was filled with warm afternoon light. For a moment she was disoriented, panic rising in her chest as she tried to place her surroundings. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back her father's rage, her desperate flight, Tucker Irwin's unexpected kindness. She sat up gingerly, every muscle in her body protesting. Her face throbbed, and when she touched her cheek, she could feel the swelling had increased. A soft knock at the door made her start. "Miss Taylor? Are you awake?" The voice belonged to a woman. "Yes," Bethany called, her voice hoarse. "Come in." The door opened to reveal an older woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, though her face was kind as she surveyed Bethany with concern. "I'm Mrs. Daniels. Mr. Irwin asked me to check on you when you woke. My goodness, that's quite an eye you have there." Bethany touched her face self-consciously. "Is it very bad?" "Nothing that won't heal," Mrs. Daniels said briskly. "I've brought you some clean clothes and a basin for washing. And there's food when you're ready. Mr. Irwin said you had a difficult night, so I won't pry, but if there's anything you need, you just let me know." "Thank you," Bethany said, touched by the woman's matter-of-fact kindness. "The clothes, are they yours?" Mrs. Daniels smiled. "They belong to my daughter. She's married now and living in Oregon. They should fit you well enough until we can sort something else out." After Mrs. Daniels left, Bethany washed as best she could with the basin of water and changed into the borrowed dress. It was a simple calico, but clean and in good repair. She ran her fingers through her tangled hair, wishing for a brush, and then made her way out to the main part of the house. She found Tucker and Mrs. Daniels in the kitchen, where a simple meal of bread, cheese, and stew was laid out on the table. Tucker stood when she entered, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. "You look better," he said, then flushed slightly. "I mean, you look rested. How's the eye feeling?" "Sore," Bethany admitted, taking the seat he offered, "but better than it might have been, thanks to your help." Mrs. Daniels placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of her. "Eat," she instructed. "Nothing helps healing like a full stomach." As Bethany ate, she became aware of Tucker watching her, his expression thoughtful. When she'd finished, he cleared his throat. "I need to be direct, Miss Taylor. Your father came by while you were sleeping." Bethany's spoon clattered to the table. "What? He was here?" Tucker nodded grimly. "He and two of his men. They're searching all the ranches in the area. Said you'd run off after a disagreement, and he was worried for your safety." Bile rose in Bethany's throat. A disagreement. Is that what he called it? "I gathered it was something more," Tucker said quietly. "Which is why I told him I hadn't seen you." Relief flooded through Bethany. "He believed you. For now, but he'll be back. Benjamin Taylor isn't a man who gives up easily, especially when his pride is at stake." "What am I going to do?" Bethany whispered, more to herself than to Tucker. "You could stay here," Tucker offered, surprising her. "At least until your injuries heal. And you've had time to make a plan. My ranch is small, but there's plenty of room, and Mrs. Daniels could use some help around the house." "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," Tucker interrupted. "And truth be told, I could use the help too. My foreman quit last month, and I'm short-handed with spring roundup coming." Mrs. Daniels snorted. "What Mr. Irwin isn't telling you is that half his cowhands quit because he can't cook worth a damn, and they got tired of beans and salt pork every night." Tucker's ears reddened. "That might be a slight exaggeration, Mrs. Daniels." Despite everything, Bethany found herself smiling. "I can cook. and clean and sew and tend a garden. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Irwin. Tucker, he reminded her, and I never thought you were. But you should know what you're getting into. This isn't a charity offer. I'd pay you fair wages, same as I would any housekeeper or cook. Bethany considered his offer. Staying meant risking that her father would return and find her, but it also meant shelter, food, and time to heal and plan. And something about Tucker Irwin made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. All right, she said finally, I'll stay. But only until I've saved enough to move on. Tucker nodded, but something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, before he stood. That's settled then. I've got work to do in the north pasture. Mrs. Daniels will show you around and help you get settled. After he left, Mrs. Daniels gave Bethany a measuring look. He's a good man, Mr. Irwin is, one of the best I've known. Took over this ranch when his pa died 2 years back, and he's worked himself to the bone trying to make it thrive. He seems kind, Bethany agreed cautiously. Kind, yes, but lonely too. A ranch needs a woman's touch, and a man needs companionship. Mrs. Daniels paused, her gaze shrewd. Not that I'm suggesting anything improper, mind you. Just making an observation. Bethany felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm only staying until I can make other arrangements. Of course, Mrs. Daniels said, but her knowing smile suggested she had her own thoughts on the matter. Now, let me show you around the house. The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Bethany rose early to prepare breakfast for Tucker and the 3 remaining ranch hands, spent the mornings cleaning and helping Mrs. Daniels with household tasks, and dedicated the afternoons to cooking and baking. Her bruises began to fade, the swelling in her eyes subsided, and with each passing day, she felt a little more of her fear receding. Tucker was often gone from dawn until dusk, working the ranch with a dedication that impressed her. When he returned each evening, he would wash up and join her at the table, his appreciation for her cooking evident in the way he savored each bite. They would talk as they ate, sometimes joined by Mrs. Daniels or the ranch hands, but often just the 2 of them. Bethany learned that Tucker had grown up on this ranch, the only child of a widowed father who had taught him everything he knew about ranching. He'd been to school in Helena for a few years, but had returned when his father's health began to fail. Now, at 26, he was determined to make the Lazy Eye Ranch a success, despite the challenges posed by larger operations like the Double T. In turn, Bethany shared bits of her own life, her memories of her mother, her love of books, her dreams of someday seeing more of the world than just Montana territory. She was careful, however, to avoid speaking of her father or the circumstances that had brought her to Tucker's door that night. As the days turned into weeks, Bethany found herself watching for Tucker's return each evening, her heart lifting at the sight of him riding in from the range. She told herself it was merely gratitude she felt, combined with the natural comfort that came from regular companionship after years of her father's volatile presence. But in quieter moments she admitted the truth to herself. She was developing feelings for the kind-hearted rancher who had taken her in. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Bethany was kneading bread dough when Tucker entered the kitchen unexpectedly. She looked up, surprised to see him home earlier than usual. "You're back early," she observed, brushing flour from her hands. Tucker's expression was grave as he hung his hat on a peg by the door. "I ran into Ethan Maxwell in town today. He says your father's offering a reward for information on your whereabouts. $50. Bethany's hand stilled in the dough. $50 is a lot of money around here. "It is," Tucker agreed, taking a seat at the table, "which means someone's going to start asking questions sooner or later." "I should go," Bethany said immediately, though the thought filled her with dread. I've stayed too long already. Put you at risk. No, Tucker said firmly. Running now would only make things worse. We need to think this through. We, Bethany echoed. Tucker met her gaze steadily. Yes, we. I'm not sending you off to face this alone, Bethany. The way he said her name sent a warmth spreading through her chest. What do you suggest? Tucker leaned forward, his expression earnest. Your father can't force you to go back with him. You're of age. If you were to establish yourself openly somewhere, take a job in town, perhaps there'd be nothing he could legally do to you. You don't know my father, Bethany said quietly. He doesn't need the law to get what he wants. No, Tucker agreed, but he does need to maintain his standing in the community. If people knew what he'd done to you. No one would believe me over Benjamin Taylor, Bethany said bitterly. He's one of the most respected men in the county. I believe you, Tucker said simply. Bethany looked up, meeting his steady gaze. Something passed between them in that moment, a current of understanding and something deeper that made her breath catch in her throat. Thank you, she whispered. Tucker stood, moving around the table until he was standing before her. Gently, he reached out to touch the fading bruise around her eye. I've been thinking about this since the day you arrived. There's one surefire way to protect you from your father. Bethany's heart began to race. What's that? Marriage, Tucker said, his voice low and serious. As my wife, you'd have my name and my protection. Your father would have no claim on you whatsoever. Bethany stepped back, stunned by his proposal. Marriage? Tucker, you can't be serious. I'm entirely serious, he replied, though a flush crept up his neck. I know it's sudden, and I know we haven't known each other long, but I care for you, Bethany, more than I expected to. And I think I hope that you might feel something for me, too. Bethany's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny her growing feelings for Tucker, but marriage. It seemed so sudden, so drastic. This isn't just about protection, Tucker continued, as if reading her thoughts. I wouldn't offer marriage solely for that reason. But I won't pretend it isn't a consideration. I don't know what to say, Bethany admitted. You don't have to answer now, Tucker said gently. Think about it. Take all the time you need. But know that my offer is sincere, and it stands regardless of your father or any other outside consideration. With that, he excused himself, leaving Bethany alone with her thoughts and a half-kneaded loaf of bread. That night, sleep eluded her as she turned Tucker's proposal over in her mind. Marriage had always seemed like a distant possibility, something that might happen someday but wasn't part of her immediate plans. Her father had discouraged suitors, claiming no man was good enough for his daughter, though Bethany suspected his real motive was to keep her at home, cooking and cleaning for him without complaint. Tucker was different from any man she'd known, kind where her father was cruel, gentle where Benjamin was harsh. In the short time she'd known him, he'd shown her more respect and consideration than her father had in years, and there was no denying the attraction she felt towards him, the way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally touched. But was that enough to build a marriage on? And what if her father discovered her whereabouts regardless? Would Tucker be in danger? These questions plagued her until dawn began to lighten the sky outside her window. When she finally rose to start breakfast, she was no closer to an answer than she had been the night before. Tucker didn't press her, though she caught him watching her throughout the day with a mixture of hope and resignation in his eyes. 3 days later, the decision was made for her. Bethany was hanging laundry in the yard, enjoying the spring sunshine, when the sound of approaching riders made her look up. Her blood turned to ice in her veins as she recognized the lead rider, her father, his face set in lines of grim determination. Behind him rode two of his ranch hands, men who had watched him beat her without intervening. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran for the house, heart pounding with terror. Tucker was in the barn, too far away to reach before her father arrived. "Bethany," Benjamin Taylor's voice boomed across the yard. "I know you're there, girl. Show yourself." Mrs. Daniels appeared at the kitchen door, her face pale. "Is that him? Your father?" Bethany nodded, unable to speak through her fear. "Go out the back," Mrs. Daniels urged. "I'll stall him." But before Bethany could move, the thunder of hooves in the yard told her it was too late. Her father dismounted, his spurs jangling as he approached the house. "Where is she?" he demanded of Mrs. Daniels. "Where's my daughter?" "I don't know who you're talking about," Mrs. Daniels replied, her voice steady despite the tremor Bethany could see in her hands. Benjamin's face darkened with anger. "Don't lie to me, woman. I know she's here. Ethan Maxwell saw her in town last week." Bethany's heart sank. She'd gone into Silver Creek with Mrs. Daniels to purchase supplies, thinking herself safe with her bruises healed and her hair styled differently. Clearly, she'd been recognized. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out onto the porch, forcing herself to meet her father's gaze. "Hello, Father?" Benjamin's expression shifted from anger to something resembling relief, though it quickly hardened again. "There you are. You've had your little adventure, Bethany. Now it's time to come home." "I'm not coming back with you," Bethany said, amazed at the steadiness of her own voice. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "Don't be foolish, girl. You have nowhere else to go. This man has been harboring you illegally. He could face charges for that." "That's not true," Bethany replied. "I'm 20 years old, Father. I'm free to go where I please." "As long as you're my daughter, you'll do as I say," Benjamin growled, taking a step toward her. "Mrs. Daniels moved protectively in front of Bethany, but Benjamin shoved her aside with enough force to send the older woman stumbling. "Don't touch her," Bethany cried, anger replacing her fear. "Or what?" Benjamin sneered. "You'll run away again? There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you, girl. Now get your things. We're leaving." "She's not going anywhere with you." Tucker's voice, hard with controlled anger, came from behind Benjamin. He stood at the edge of the yard, a rifle held casually but unmistakably ready in his hands. Benjamin turned slowly. "This doesn't concern you, Irwin. She's my daughter." "She's my fiancée," Tucker replied, the word sending a jolt through Bethany. "And she's staying right here." Benjamin's face contorted with rage. "Fiancé? You think I'd let my daughter marry a two-bit rancher like you? A man who can barely keep his own operation afloat?" "It's not your decision to make," Tucker said evenly. "Bethany has made her choice." Benjamin turned back to Bethany, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Is this true? You'd choose him over your own family?" Bethany looked from her father to Tucker, whose steady gaze gave her the courage she needed. In that moment, she knew her answer to his proposal. "Yes," she said clearly. "I've accepted Tucker's proposal. We're to be married." "I forbid it," Benjamin roared. "You have no say in the matter," Bethany replied, descending the porch steps to stand beside Tucker. "I'm of age, and I'm making my own decisions now." Benjamin's hand moved to the gun at his hip, but one of his ranch hands stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Taylor," the man said quietly, "this isn't the way, not with witnesses." For a tense moment, Benjamin seemed poised to ignore the warning. his fingers twitching near his weapon. Then, with a visible effort, he regained control of himself. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're free of me? We'll see about that." With a final venomous glare, he turned and strode back to his horse, his men following. As they rode away, Bethany's knees gave out, and she would have fallen if Tucker hadn't caught her. "Are you all right?" he asked, setting the rifle aside to support her. Bethany nodded, unable to speak as relief and fear warred within her. Tucker led her to the porch where Mrs. Daniels was sitting, looking shaken but unhurt. "I'm sorry," Bethany said finally. "I've brought nothing but trouble to your home." "Nonsense," Mrs. Daniels said firmly. "That man is the trouble, not you." Tucker knelt before Bethany, taking her hands in his. "Did you mean what you said? About accepting my proposal?" Bethany met his gaze, seeing the hope and uncertainty there. "I did," she said softly, "if the offer still stands." A smile broke across Tucker's face, transforming it with joy. "It does. It absolutely does." 3 days later, Bethany stood in the small church in Silver Creek, wearing a borrowed dress and clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. The ceremony was simple, with only Mrs. Daniels and Tucker's 3 ranch hands as witnesses. The pastor, a kind-faced older man, made no comment about the hastiness of the wedding, merely offering his blessings and conducting the service with dignity. As Bethany spoke her vows, she was surprised by the certainty she felt. What had begun as a practical arrangement for protection had, in the short time she'd known Tucker, blossomed into something much deeper. The way he looked at her as he promised to love and cherish her sent warmth spreading through her chest. When the pastor pronounced them man and wife, Tucker's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of things to come. As they walked back down the aisle together, Bethany felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't how she had imagined her wedding day, but somehow it was perfect nonetheless. The small celebration that followed at the ranch was joyful, with Mrs. Daniels preparing a feast and the ranch hands breaking out a fiddle and harmonica for dancing. As twilight fell, Bethany found herself in Tucker's arms, swaying to a slow tune beneath the stars. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her hair. "Yes," she answered truthfully, "happier than I've been in a very long time." Later, when they were alone in what was now their shared bedroom, Bethany felt a flutter of nervousness. Tucker seemed to sense her anxiety, for he took her hands in his and brought them to his lips. "We have all the time in the world," he assured her. "Nothing has to happen tonight that you don't want." Bethany's heart swelled with gratitude for his understanding. "I do want you," she admitted shyly. "I'm just new to this." Tucker's smile was tender as he cupped her face. "So am I in many ways. We'll learn together." What followed was a night of gentle discovery, of whispered words and tender touches. Tucker's reverence for her body, his patience and care, healed something broken within Bethany. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be truly cherished, to be loved not for what she could do, but simply for who she was. As she drifted to sleep in his arms, Bethany felt a peace she had thought lost forever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and she had no doubt there would be many, they would face them together. The following weeks were a time of adjustment as Bethany settled into her new role as Mrs. Irwin. The ranch hands treated her with a mixture of respect and awkward courtesy, clearly approving of the improvements to their meals, but unsure how to interact with the boss's new wife. Mrs. Daniels, however, was delighted by the development, taking obvious pride in having predicted it from the start. I knew from the moment he brought you home that you belonged here, she told Bethany one afternoon as they preserved strawberries from the small kitchen garden. A person doesn't have to know two people long to see when they fit together. Bethany smiled, touched by the older woman's approval. I never expected to find this kind of happiness, she admitted. After my mother died and father changed, I thought that part of my life was over. Mrs. Daniels patted her hand. Life has a way of surprising us, especially when we're at our lowest. My Henry used to say that the Lord never closes a door without opening a window somewhere. The ranch flourished under their combined care. Bethany's cooking and household management improved morale among the hands, while Tucker's hard work and fair treatment earned their loyalty. By early summer, the Lazy Eye was showing signs of becoming the successful operation Tucker had always envisioned, but the shadow of Benjamin Taylor still loomed over their happiness. Bethany heard rumors from town that her father was drinking heavily and making threats against Tucker when he was in his cups. Each time Tucker rode into Silver Creek, she waited anxiously for his return, fearing a confrontation. Tucker tried to ease her worries. "Your father is all talk," he assured her one night as they lay together. "He knows he can't do anything without risking his stand in the community. And from what I hear, that standing is already slipping. People are starting to talk about his drinking, about the way his ranch is being neglected." Bethany sighed, nestling closer to her husband. "I hope you're right, but I know my father. He doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive what he sees as betrayal." Her fears proved well-founded one hot July afternoon. Bethany was alone at the ranch, Tucker and the hands having ridden out at dawn to move cattle to higher pasture. Mrs. Daniels had gone to town for supplies, leaving Bethany to catch up on mending and bread making. She was elbow-deep in dough when she heard a horse approaching. Thinking it might be Mrs. Daniels returning early, she wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. The smile died on her lips as she saw her father dismounting in the yard, his movements unsteady, his face flushed with drink despite the early hour. Bethany's first instinct was to bar the door, but she knew the flimsy lock would be no match for her father's determination. Instead, she stepped onto the porch, hoping her calm exterior would mask the fear churning inside her. "Father," she said evenly, "what brings you here?" Benjamin swayed slightly as he approached. Can't a father visit his daughter, see how she's faring with her new husband? His words were slurred, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. Bethany had seen him this way too many times not to recognize the danger. "Tucker isn't here," she said, keeping her voice steady. "He's out with the hands. You should come back another time." A dangerous smile spread across Benjamin's face. "Good. I wanted to talk to you alone." He mounted the porch steps, and Bethany fought the urge to retreat. "There's nothing to talk about, Father. I've made my choice." "A foolish choice," Benjamin growled. "Running off with the first man who showed you kindness. You think that's love? You think it will last?" "It's more than I ever had from you," Bethany replied, courage born of months of safety strengthening her voice. Benjamin's face darkened with rage. "After everything I did for you, raising you alone after your mother died, providing for you, giving you a home, and using me as your servant and your punching bag," Bethany interrupted. "Did you think I'd stay forever? Let you beat me whenever the mood struck you?" Benjamin lunged forward suddenly, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You ungrateful little—" "Let her go." The voice came from behind Benjamin, cold and commanding. Tucker stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his rifle aimed steadily at Benjamin's chest. Behind him, Mrs. Daniels sat rigid in the wagon, her face pale with fear. Benjamin's grip on Bethany's arm tightened momentarily before he released her with a shove that sent her stumbling back against the doorframe. "This is between me and my daughter," he snarled. "She's my wife now," Tucker replied, his voice dangerously calm. "And you're trespassing on my property." Benjamin turned to face Tucker fully, his hand hovering near his holstered pistol. "You stole what was mine. Did you think I'd just let that stand?" "Bethany doesn't belong to anyone," Tucker said. "She's a person, not property. And she chose to leave you, chose to marry me." "She's confused," Benjamin insisted. "Doesn't know what she wants. She needs her father's guidance." "What she needed," Tucker said, his voice hardening, "was safety from the man who was supposed to protect her. The man who gave her that black eye I tended the night she stumbled onto my land." Benjamin's face contorted with rage. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than me. You're nothing but a failing rancher who saw an opportunity to get his hands on Taylor land through my daughter." Tucker's expression didn't change, but Bethany saw his knuckles whiten at the rifle. "I've never wanted anything from Bethany except her happiness, which is more than I can say for you." For a long, tense moment, the two men stared at each other, the air between them charged with the potential for violence. Then, slowly, Benjamin's hand dropped away from his gun. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and menacing. "One day, girl, you'll realize your mistake, and when you come crawling back, don't expect a warm welcome." With that, he pushed past Tucker and staggered to his horse, mounting with difficulty before spurring the animal into a gallop away from the ranch. Tucker waited until Benjamin was out of sight before lowering his rifle and rushing to Bethany's side. "Are you hurt?" he asked, examining the red marks on her arm where Benjamin had gripped her. Bethany shook her head, though tears were streaming down her face. "I'm all right, just shaken." Tucker pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she trembled against him. "I shouldn't have left you alone. I knew he might come here." "You couldn't have known it would be today," Bethany said, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "And you can't stay by my side every minute." Mrs. Daniels approached, her face creased with concern. "Let's get you inside, child. I'll make some tea with honey, good for the nerves." As they entered the house, Bethany felt the familiar weight of dread settling over her. "He won't stop, Tucker. Not until he's made us pay for what he sees as humiliation." Tucker's expression was grim but determined. "Then we'll be ready for him. I won't let him hurt you again, Bethany. I promise you that." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Bethany voiced the fear that had been growing since her father's visit. "What if we can't build a life here? What if we'll never be free of him as long as we're in Montana?" Tucker was silent for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair thoughtfully. "Would you want to leave?" he asked finally. "Start over somewhere new?" Bethany lifted her head to look at him, surprised by the question. "Leave the ranch? But it's been in your family for generations. It's your home." "You're my home now," Tucker said simply. "The land, the cattle, they're just things. Important things, yes, but not as important as your safety and happiness." Tears welled in Bethany's eyes at his words. "You would do that? Leave everything you've built here?" Tucker nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "If that's what it takes, yes, we could go west to Oregon or Washington Territory, or south to Colorado. Start fresh where your father's influence doesn't reach." The enormity of what he was offering struck Bethany with full force. To abandon his heritage, his land, everything he'd worked for, all for her. It was a sacrifice she couldn't ask of him. "No," she said firmly. "This is your home, Tucker, our home. I won't let my father drive us away from it." Tucker studied her face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Are you sure? It won't be easy staying here." "I'm sure," Bethany replied, settling back against his chest. "We'll face whatever comes together. As long as we have each other, we'll be all right." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "Together, then." Summer gave way to fall and life on the lazy. I fell into a rhythm that brought Bethany a contentment she had never known. The confrontation with her father had been frightening, but in its aftermath, she found a new strength within herself. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd fled into the night with a blackened eye and few possessions. She was Bethany Irwin, wife and partner to a man who valued and respected her. News from town suggested that Benjamin Taylor's fortunes were declining. His drinking had worsened, and many of his best hands had left for other employment. The Double T, once the pride of the county, was showing signs of neglect. Bethany felt a complex mix of emotions at these reports: sadness for the man her father had once been, before grief and alcohol had twisted him, but also relief that his attention seemed focused on his own troubles rather than on her and Tucker. As the first snowfall dusted the mountains, Bethany made a discovery that filled her with both joy and trepidation. She was expecting a child. When she shared the news with Tucker, his face lit up with such profound happiness that any doubts she had about the timing vanished. "A baby," he breathed, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Bethany covered his hand with hers. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased?" Tucker laughed, lifting her off her feet in a gentle twirl. "I'm beyond pleased. I'm ecstatic." His excitement was infectious, and soon Mrs. Daniels and the ranch hands were caught up in the anticipation of a new addition to the lazy eye. The housekeeper took it upon herself to begin knitting tiny garments, while the men offered to build a cradle and insisted that Bethany rest more and let them take on additional chores. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing short days and long, cozy evenings by the fire, Bethany's body began to change, her waistline thickening, her breasts becoming fuller. Tucker watched these changes with reverent fascination, his love for her deepening as she carried their child. "You're more beautiful than ever," he told her one night as they lay together, his hand caressing the gentle swell of her belly. "I never thought I could be this happy." Bethany smiled, threading her fingers through his. "Nor I. Sometimes I'm afraid to believe it's real, that something will come along and take it all away." Tucker pressed a kiss to her temple. "Nothing will take this away from us, Bethany. I promise you that." But even as he spoke the words, both knew there were some things beyond their control. Benjamin Taylor's shadow still loomed over their happiness, a persistent fear that refused to be entirely banished. Their fears materialized one bitter January afternoon when a writer from town brought news that froze Bethany's blood. Benjamin Taylor had been found dead in his home, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his side and a gunshot wound to his temple. Bethany received the news in stunned silence, unable to process the conflicting emotions that washed over her. Tucker dismissed the messenger with thanks and a coin for his trouble before turning to his wife, his face etched with concern. "Bethany," he said gently, "are you all right?" She nodded mechanically, one hand going protectively to her rounded belly. "I'm fine, just surprised." Tucker led her to a chair, kneeling before her. "It's all right to grieve him, you know. Despite everything, he was your father." Tears welled in Bethany's eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. That's just it. I don't know what I'm feeling. Relief, sadness, guilt, all of it at once. Does that make me a terrible person? No, Tucker said firmly, taking her hands in his. It makes you human. Your father was a complicated man who caused you great pain, but he was still your blood. It's natural to have complicated feelings about his death. Bethany nodded, drawing a shaky breath. There was a time after Mother died when he was different, when he would read to me in the evenings and teach me to ride, before the drinking got so bad. Tucker squeezed her hands gently. Hold on to those memories. They're just as real as the painful ones. In the days that followed, Bethany learned more about her father's final months. The Double T had fallen into serious financial difficulty due to Benjamin's neglect and poor decisions. Most of his hands had left, and he had begun selling off parcels of land to cover his debts and fund his drinking. His suicide, it seemed, had come after receiving notice that the bank intended to foreclose on the remaining property. The funeral was sparsely attended, a few business associates, some neighbors, and Bethany and Tucker, who stood at the back of the small church, Bethany's pregnancy now obvious beneath her black dress. No one questioned her right to be there, though she caught a few curious glances. As the simple coffin was lowered into the frozen ground, Bethany felt a sense of closure washing over her. The man who had dominated her life with his anger and violence was gone, leaving her truly free for the first time. As they rode home in silence, Tucker reached across the wagon seat to take her hand. "What are you thinking?" Bethany gazed at the snow-covered landscape. "About beginnings and endings, about how sometimes the two are so intertwined you can't separate them." Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Your father's ending is coming at the same time as our child's beginning." "Yes," Bethany said softly, "and I can't help thinking that's as it should be. The past giving way to the future." When they returned to the ranch, a letter was waiting for them, a formal notice from her father's lawyer. As the sole heir, Bethany had inherited what remained of the Double T, though the inheritance was complicated by the substantial debts that came with it. "What will you do?" Tucker asked as they discussed the letter that evening. "The land that's left is still considerable, even with the debts." Bethany considered the question carefully. "I don't want to return there. Too many painful memories, but I don't want to sell it to strangers either. It was my mother's home before it was my father's." Tucker was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "What if we incorporated it into the Lazy Eye, not to live there, but to expand our operation? We could use the good grazing land, and with time, we might be able to pay off the debts and make it profitable again." Bethany smiled, touched by his willingness to take on her father's troubled legacy. "You would do that, even knowing its history?" "History doesn't define the future," Tucker said, placing his hand on her rounded belly. "We're proof of that. The land itself is innocent of what happened there. It deserves a chance at a new beginning, just as you did." 2 months later, as the first signs of spring began to appear in the Montana landscape, Bethany gave birth to a daughter after a long and difficult labor. Tucker, who had paced outside the bedroom door for hours, listening to his wife's cries with growing anxiety, was overcome with emotion when Mrs. Daniels finally invited him in to meet his child. Bethany lay propped against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. When she saw Tucker, her face lit up with a smile of such pure joy that it brought tears to his eyes. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Tucker approached the bed with reverent steps, his heart swelling as he gazed down at the tiny, perfect face of his child. Wisps of dark hair crowned her head, and when she yawned and opened her eyes, he saw they were the same clear blue as Bethany's. "She's beautiful," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Perfect in every way." Bethany shifted the bundle, offering their daughter to him. "Would you like to hold her?" With trembling hands, Tucker took his daughter, cradling her against his chest with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to Bethany's eyes. "What shall we call her?" he asked, unable to tear his gaze from the infant's face. Bethany had given this much thought during the long months of her pregnancy. "Margaret," she said, "after my mother." Tucker nodded, smiling down at the baby. "Margaret Irwin, it suits her." As he handed their daughter back to Bethany and settled beside them on the bed, Tucker was struck by the journey that had brought them to this moment. A little over a year ago, Bethany had stumbled onto his land, battered and frightened, seeking nothing more than a temporary refuge. Now she was his wife, the mother of his child, and the center of his world. "I love you," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Both of you, more than I ever thought possible." Bethany leaned against him, their daughter nestled between them. "And I love you. You gave me safety when I needed it most, and then you gave me a home and a family. I never dared to dream of such happiness." Outside, the Montana spring was bringing new life to the land, green shoots pushing through the soil, calves being born in the pastures, birds returning to nest in the eaves of the barn. Within the walls of the Lazy Eye Ranch, a new family was beginning its own journey, built on the foundation of a chance encounter on a dark night, when a battered young woman had found refuge with a kind-hearted cowboy who had offered her a place to rest. As the years passed, the Irwin family flourished. Margaret grew into a spirited, intelligent child with her mother's blue eyes and her father's quiet determination. She was joined by two brothers, James, born 2 years after her, and William, who arrived 3 years later. The children filled the ranch house with laughter and energy, transforming it from a simple dwelling into a true home. The combined lands of the Lazy Yar and what had once been the Double T prospered under Tucker and Bethany's careful management. They worked side by side, equal partners in all things, their complementary strengths creating an operation that became one of the most successful in the county. Tucker's fair treatment of his hands earned him their loyalty, while Bethany's natural business acumen helped them make wise decisions about breeding stock and land use. Mrs. Daniels remained with them until her passing at the age of 78, by which time Margaret was old enough to take on many of the household responsibilities. The elderly housekeeper had been like a grandmother to the children, teaching them cooking and sewing, sharing stories of the early days in Montana territory, and always reminding them of how their parents had found each other. "Your mother came to us on the darkest of nights," she would tell the children as they gathered around the fire on winter evenings, "with nothing but the clothes on her back and the strongest heart I've ever known. And your father, he took one look at her and said, 'Stay here and rest.' Little did he know that rest would turn into forever." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Bethany with a trip to Helena, leaving the children in the capable hands of their foreman's wife. It was the first time Bethany had been away from the ranch since their marriage, and she relished the experience of staying in a fine hotel, attending the theater, and shopping in real stores rather than from catalogs. On their final evening in the city, as they sat together in their hotel room, Tucker presented her with a small velvet box. Inside was a gold locket intricately engraved with their initials. "Open it," he urged. Bethany did, finding a tiny portrait of their 3 children on one side, and on the other a miniature painting of the ranch house with the mountains rising behind it. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Tucker fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin. "To remind you of how far we've come. From that night when you arrived with nothing but courage and determination to now a family, a home, a life built together." Bethany touched the locket reverently. "I never forget. Not for a single day." As they prepared for bed, Bethany stood at the window, looking out at the lights of Helena and the distant mountains silhouetted against the night sky. Tucker came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Bethany leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "About chance, about how a single moment can change the course of a life. If I hadn't run in the direction I did that night, if you hadn't heard me fall." Tucker tightened his arms around her. "I've thought about that too. But I don't think it was just chance, Bethany. I think some things are meant to be." Bethany turned in his embrace to face him, cupping his beloved face in her hands. In the decade they had been together, lines had appeared at the corners of his eyes, and threads of silver had begun to show in his dark hair. To Bethany, he was more handsome than ever, the passing years only adding depth and character to the face she loved. "I think you're right," she said softly. "Some things are meant to be. Like us." As they returned to the ranch the following day, the familiar landscape spreading out before them, Bethany felt a surge of gratitude for the life she had found. The nightmare of her father's house had faded into the past, replaced by the joy of the family she and Tucker had created together. The children ran to meet them as they approached. Margaret, now a leggy 10-year-old, James, solid and serious at 8, and William, still chubby-cheeked at 5, bringing up the rear. Behind them came the ranch hands, welcoming the return of their boss and his wife with genuine warmth. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Bethany looked around at the faces she loved most in the world and felt her heart overflow with contentment. From the darkest night of her life had come the brightest dawn, a second chance she had never expected, but had embraced with her whole heart. Later, as she and Tucker prepared for bed, he caught her in a gentle embrace. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin," he murmured against her hair. Bethany smiled, remembering the frightened young woman she had been and marveling at the journey that had brought her here. "I'm home," she replied simply. "Wherever you are. That's where I belong." And as they settled into bed together, the ranch house quiet around them and the vast Montana sky star filled above them, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true place in the world, not just a place to stay and rest, but a place to live and love and thrive for all the days of her life.